Hi, this is an introduction to IT 223, which is Database Administration. It used to be IT 226, but the numbers have changed, as you might have noticed. First, ignore the mess behind me. We are cleaning out the garage, and my office has become a temporary storage place for a lot of different things. So, couple of things. I will every week give you a video where I say what's going on, checking in, making sure we have an idea of where you should be and what things need to be covered. I will also maybe in those videos add some materials dependent on your assignments. So let's look at the syllabus and a couple of other things. So here's the syllabus. Whoa, no, I clicked out of there. There's the syllabus. Notice there's a blog at which I haven't used much for this, but there are YouTube videos. If you look at those, you'll see that all of them are for the course. They're all linked into the modules. You might also notice that the playlist, I called it IT 223. And that should be, is that the right number? Yes, it is. So these are the videos for the class. There are some there that I haven't explicitly linked yet, and there will be more as I add them. I'm still working on this course. Hi, this is going to be the video on users and security. So if we look at that assignment, you'll see that what we want to do, let me enhance it a little bit. Let's go back to here. So we have the YouTube videos. Basically, the prerequisites are that you've done the SQL. There isn't a ton of SQL here, but there is some, and I actually am going to give it to you. So if you haven't done that, you should be okay. If you have any disability or need some accommodation, let me know. For office hours, it's not really office hours. I will just respond as quickly as I can to anything that you ask. You can post to discussions or you can email me. If you really need, I can schedule a Zoom meeting. Now, I do not have a professional Zoom, so any meeting would be limited to 20 or 30 minutes max. And I'm not I don't like Zoom, but I will do it if you need. Here's my email. There's my website, although it is not particularly relevant for this. So we're going to do some things. We're going to install a database server. We'll use a variety of tools and techniques to monitor and optimize. We'll do some availability tools. We'll gather and document security requirements. We're going to talk about how you set those up. You're going to work in a team, and we're going to have you locate and use sources of relevant information. And there isn't any book, but I'm going to give you videos, entries, and links to prepare for the assignments. So there's a bunch of additional information down here that you might want to look at. Okay, but let's go to the modules. Modules are your home page, and they're where most of what you're looking at will be. So I'm going to do this in a moment. Google Slides overview of database administration. But first, let's talk about the way the modules are set up. I have individual assignment videos and other materials. So all the materials that relate to the individual assignments are up here. I'm trying to be less confusing than I've been in the past, but it may be more so. You can let me know. We're going to do a series of individual assignments. These you will turn in on your own, but most of them are pretty much guided by me. If you look at design the ERD, for instance, you can create an ERD. It's described in the project database. You can follow the video, and I may link the videos into the assignments as well as the modules. They aren't there yet, but I may add them. And then the video actually directs you how to draw the entity relation diagram. So I just want you to practice drawing it and kind of do what I do in the video. A lot of these assignments are like that. A few of them have a few additional things to do. When you do create the database, if we go to the modules, there is one on SQL to create the climate change database, and it actually gives you the SQL. A couple of caveats. It's not, there are things that I would add to the database if I was doing this for real. I've simplified it a little bit. All right, so let's go back to the modules. So there are the individual assignments. And then there are the group assignments. So the group is basically you're going to do the whole thing that we did in the individual assignments, but as a group and with a different database setup. So each of these is an assignment for the group to do. And I'm going to go through and make sure that they're all that, but part of the first one is to say that what database you're working with, what who is in your group. Group stuff online can be a little bit challenging, so I did add some ideas for tools for working together in groups. Google Docs, Zoom, Slack. There's also Teams and Microsoft Office 365. Whatever you want to work with, as long as you can work together in a group. We'll talk about that more when we're probably about week 3 or 4. I'll let you join on your own, but anyone that hasn't joined at a certain time will be just added to groups. All right. So the group work, half of the quarter is doing individual work with a lot of guidance, and the second half is to develop a whole administration plan as a group on your own. All right, I'm not sure if that makes sense, but we'll clarify it as we go on. Last thing I think I want to do, well, a couple of things about the software that we'll be using. Postgres for the beginning. If you haven't got it, here you can download it, postgres.org. Okay, and it works on Macs, Linux, or Windows, so it works on everything. The other thing that we'll be using for at least the ERD parts are the Lucidchart, and I think most of you have done this, but if you haven't, don't do the free one. Don't do the sign up for free. Go down here to the education and do the education logon. All right, so create an account with the educational account. You'll need your EDU address. It gives you more charts and more tools than the try for free. So those are the two things that we'll be using. Other than documents, the documents could be in Word or they could be in Google Docs, however you guys want to do them. Last thing I'm going to do is just a real quick overview of database administration, because you probably haven't thought a lot about what this might involve. So, and I'm going to do this as a present. So the database administration, they got, what are the key tasks? Basically, they're choosing and installing a DBMS. And that is something like, are we going to use SQL Server? Are we going to use Postgres? Are we going to use Oracle? Are we going to use MySQL? What are the tools? Are we going to use a NoSQL database like Mongo? What are the tools that you're going to use? And you need to figure out what tools are best for what your task is and what tools fit your system the best. So once you have the tool set up, designing, creating, and maintaining databases is a major administrative task. That's the point of a database, is to have databases, and you need to add them, create them, maintain them. We're going to set up database security and access rules. Right? So when you have a database, not everybody should have the same permissions and the same privileges, and who should have what access and who needs to do what. So we'll look at that. We'll talk a little bit about managing availability and disaster recovery. Mostly we'll focus on backup and restore, although there's a whole lot more sophisticated ways to do that, and we'll talk about them even if though we won't do them. You can optimize the database queries and performance. This has a lot to do with indexing uh, and other tools. It could also be much more sophisticated in terms of catching and creating. We'll talk a little bit about materialized queries and etc. for that. Ways of speeding things up. And we'll talk a bit about automating and making database tasks occur automatically. We'll try to set up a task to automatically back up the database. So again, choosing, testing, and installing. So you need to figure out which tools best meet the needs of the business requirements. Once you've done it, you need to test it. See if it does in fact meet the needs. Those needs could include things such as load and concurrency. We can talk about those, but they're not something that's easy to replicate. Make sure there are no hidden or issues that will arise. And then when it's done, you need to install it. You'll have to install it to test it, and then you need to install it into the actual installation, which can be a difficult task. So we're going to design and create databases, and we'll do it by means of SQL. And once the database is up and running, you need to manage the database, and part of what that involves are things like setting up security. A database administrator will need to who has access, what access. In Postgres, it's roles that can be created for different types of users and assign permissions. And again, the general rule is that a user should be granted all the permissions needed to do their jobs, but no more. We'll manage availability, and again, this is much more complex than what we'll look at, but most databases are up 24/7. That means that it's really hard to schedule maintenance and backups. Typically, they do these by setting up clusters so that some servers can be down while others are up. We're not going to do that, but we could talk about it. It's also important to have a plan in case of disasters. What happens if a disk fails, but also what happens if there's an earthquake or a hurricane. The goal, though not always possible, is to keep the data available no matter what. Optimization is about performance. So how do you handle hundreds of millions of records and thousands of simultaneous users? If databases were not optimized, it could take a long time to get this. We'll talk about indexing tables, materialized views, denormalization, and other strategies. It can also include clusters of servers, load balancing, mirroring, etc. And then automation. So we'll talk about how to set up things so that they're automated. You generally don't want to have to come in and do everything manually. The more that you can set up to be automatic, the more effectively the databases can run. And it's possible to schedule alerts to tell when the processes were run. That should be were, not where. And where and if there were any errors. Okay, that's it for that. So these are the things that we're going to do again, and I'm just going to go back to modules. 2 things to be aware of. There are a series of individual assignments, and then there are a series of group assignments. They mirror each other exactly. Okay, so we'll talk about the group stuff more as we get closer. I really want to do the individual stuff first. Summer is only 8 weeks, so we don't want to spend more than 4 weeks doing the individual stuff. All right, other things, I don't take off for late assignments, though I really encourage you not to get too far behind. Particularly in the summer, it's really hard to blow things off. All right, so hopefully we'll have a good summer. And we'll all do fine, and then we can take September off and try to enjoy this weird year. We'll see how things are in September. Anyway, take care, and I'm concluding